divide us and an excuse to not get anything done. I thought maybe you would speak to what you're thinking about now as a former mayor and what your fellow mayors are going through right now.
All right. Well, first of all, it's great to be reunited with you, and I'm so thankful to the host committee and everybody who's contributed generously to make this a successful event. It's a strange thing, you know. Campaigning in politics is so much about physically gathering together, and I know we're prevented from that at a moment in the life of this country where we could really use each other's company. And so I'm thankful that we're able to do it virtually, and I feel so attached to Texas. Especially to Austin, where Mayor Adler and Diane have always made us feel at home. And I should say that I'm in some ways have a little bit of Texas in my DNA. My mother grew up in El Paso, went to Austin, had to be talked out of the eyes of Texas being played at our wedding. And I know she'd be glad to, she will be glad to know that we were together tonight. It's unfortunate that Mayor Adler can't be with us, but as your question raised, mayors right now are being called to be on the front lines of handling a series of issues that our president can't or won't deal with. And that's especially true when we look at the outcry for justice in the streets of cities across this country. I've been reflecting on the question of what's different this time, because systemic racism is nothing new. Unfortunately, even images of police violence and unarmed black men losing their lives in police custody are not new. The economic disempowerment of Black Americans is not new. What I think is different this time is, first of all, that these patterns of injustice have reached a breaking point. And secondly, that we have a president. While I think this would be a breaking point no matter who is president, we have one who is not even pretending, in the words of General Mattis, not even pretending to try to unite us, but is actively dividing us as a kind of a political strategy. I don't mean to say that elections are the only solution to the problem we face right now. The reality is that systemic racism is systemic. And that means changes need to happen across our economy, across our society. And while Black voices are and ought to be, and other voices of color are and ought to be leading the way at this time, it's also the case that most of the changes need to happen is among white Americans and in white power structures. And I think we should name that and acknowledge it and be ready to face it. This is bigger than any election, but one of the biggest moments to do something about it is the election. And I think two things are happening at the same time. On one hand, it's never been clearer why local and state office matter so much. In the absence of presidential leadership and just in our American system, we are being reminded about the role of mayors, of county judges in the Texas system, and of state legislators and governors. Dealing with the pandemic, local officials have been on the front lines. Dealing with the response to the upheaval in our cities and communities. Local and state officials have been on the front lines. So it's never been clearer how important that work is. On the other hand, there's never been less kind of oxygen available for these campaigns. At the moment when we're seeing just how important it is, it's actually harder to get resources into these crucial campaigns. And that's one of the reasons I'm so proud to support the work that you and your colleagues in the caucus are doing, and why I think the entire country would take note at how close to flipping this chamber we are. So, speaking to mayors across the country, and Mayor Adler is one who's really respected in the community of mayors. So much depends on the relationship between cities and the state. And much more than anybody realizes, that depends on the actions that are taking place in the state houses. And it's one of many reasons why it's so critically important that we deliver for you and your colleagues in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, we were talking earlier with the Bosch family, and it seems to me that it's the mayors, especially in Texas. We have some great local leadership who, in the time of crisis, have had to shape their own voice and their own priorities and roll up their sleeves and build coalitions. This country, of course, is hurting, and we should have a lot of different kinds of coalitions built and ways for people to engage. But one of the questions that Chris asked of us was, what can people do? A two-part question. I want you to tell us about your new organization, but I also feel as though in my journey as a state rep who's now trying to flip the house, I've always told people, don't wait to be asked to get involved. And by get involved, I'm talking about all of these campaigns that are working hard to connect to the voter so that they're not just an anti-Trump voice, they're a pro-Texas voice. There's a mainstream Texan that is hurting just as many other Americans are. And there are candidates who want to reach and connect with them and say, I've done good things in the community. Can I count on your vote in Austin? And so for me, getting involved in campaigns was a game changer for me. I made friends for life. So the friends that I made back in the Ann Richards years are still my buddies now that I'm a middle-aged woman. So maybe we could speak to that in terms of, engagement and being welcome and open and saying, come on in, your country needs you. And in this case, the state of Texas needs you.
That's right. And that's one of the goals of our effort, Win the Era, which is really based on proving out some of the things I would often say on the campaign trail. Many of the supporters on this call who were involved in the campaign will remember talking about how we can't treat the presidency like the only office that matters, and talking about how there's no such thing as a permanently red state or county or district or community. And so what we're doing with Win the Era is trying to make good on that by supporting candidates, largely candidates from a new generation and largely candidates of color, but across the board who are going to make a difference toward justice and toward a better future that really will set up the 2020s to go the way we need the 2020s to go in order for the rest of this half century to go well in American life. We recently announced our first round of endorsements. Gina Ortiz-Jones, who many of you know, is one of the candidates that we're working with. And we're already thinking about a second wave and would love to remain in touch with folks here about races. We're supporting everyone from Governor Roy Cooper in North Carolina up for re-election to a young candidate for county supervisor in Arizona, who I think is going to have an amazing future. And so it's a great time, I think, for us to be lifting up these races and doing it in a way that reflects what we think that the face of leadership in the future will be like, which is very diverse. And that's one of the many areas where Texas both has an opportunity, I think, to greater be reflected in elected office, and to send a message that the rest of the country would notice in a big way. Flipping the House, continuing to build. You already have a wonderful and diverse and talented Democratic congressional delegation. Seeing that continue to grow, I'm really excited about what's possible. And you're right; it involves an outreach and an invitation to engage. Remembering that not everybody feels like the halls of power or even the political process are open to them until they've been invited. There's all kinds of statistics on how women, for example, on average, need to be asked to run for office 7 times more than men before they decide to do it. And one thing we know is that we would be well served in terms of just better leadership as a country if we had real gender parity in this. But it means we really got to break down those barriers. We know that it can be expensive just to get the internships or the foot in the door that a lot of people get in order to know that they belong in the political sphere. We can all do something about that. And I know you're doing that work day in, day out with the extraordinary recruiting you're doing to get excellent candidates, including making sure that we're running candidates in places we maybe didn't always have somebody even on the ballot.
Well, Mayor Pete, as a Latina from Texas, people might not think that we have a lot in common, but we're both members of the LGBTQ community, and I know we were especially proud of the fact that you ran and you were who you were, and you were such a great candidate. It helped that you were just a smart guy who happened to be gay and had some ideas and some energy. So thank you for your race Thank you for continuing to help move this country forward. And thank you for helping us, because the Texas HDCC is the only organization that's focused just on House races. One last thought from you've traveled the country as a national candidate. Be a talking head on CNN for a minute and tell us on election night, when the House flips into control of the Democrats in the state of Texas, what does that mean for the rest of the country?
Well, I think it'll demonstrate what's possible for the rest of the country. And it will demonstrate that voters are looking at the politics of everyday life, the way that our individual lives would be better, safer, more prosperous if we had better leadership. And the extremism that has taken hold in the state capitol in Texas makes it possible for us to put forward an alternative that's going to make people's lives better. And on one hand, I believe it's absolutely doable in Texas. And on the other hand, if it can happen in Texas, it can happen anywhere in many ways, because of what people imagine. I think not understanding just how tantalizingly close that margin is that could put the House into Democratic hands. Yeah, I will be, I don't know whether I'll be popping champagne or cracking open a beer. I'll maybe lighting a cigar, but I'll find some very appropriate way to celebrate what will be, I think, a watershed moment in American politics.
Well, you may want to hang out with your friends Steve and Diane here in Austin, Texas, and feel the earth move underneath.
That'd be a welcome earthquake indeed.
Mayor Park, we're gonna park you for just a little bit. We'll come back for some Q&A. Wanted to share some slides with our guests to illustrate the points that the mayor and I were talking about, and that is the path to victory. There, if you look at this chart, this is the reason why we're not just hoping. We know that the data showed us in the last election. What you're looking at is the Beto factor. Beto ran a hard race, and the dark blue is the existing seats, 67. The light blue are the seats that Beto won, but there was no good structure within those seats. And of course, the red is what's in Republican hands. So we are very, very close to taking over. We had 55 Democrats the session before last. We flipped 12 seats last time, so we're at 67. We just need 9 seats in order to win, and winning means a lot of calming down. But let's look at this chart. This is the chart that is especially telling. These are all the races in which, again, the light blue is the Beto factor. Look how close these races were. These are the House district numbers there, your second column. Look how close we came to winning within very, very narrow margins. But in the far left, that hurts my heart to see that there are women and men who were outspent 2 and 20 to 1. There are very good and decent people who ran in 2018 who put their lives on a shelf and ran hard and didn't have the resources that they need. And for those nerds out there, I always like to say this is the difference between maybe a $30,000 race and 3 mailers, and a $300,000 race with a dozen mailers, a robust staff, the polling, and everything that goes into that. So let's look at the next slide, and that will be our indicator for some of the issues that we've been dealing with. I guess we're waiting now for Justin Nelson. So let me go to Justin, and then we'll talk about some of the dynamics. Justin, can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Oh, great background. Justin, for those of you who don't know, Justin Nelson ran for Attorney General in the last cycle. And here in Texas, we've been fighting voting rights battles that are in the vein of the stereotype of Texas leadership that wants to suppress the vote have been painful to watch. We've been fighting vote by mail here lately. But Justin has a passion, as many of us do, for the significance of this next election, which is we're in a census year going into a year in which the legislature will be able to craft a map that shows that is a fair reflection of the youth and the diversity that the great state of Texas is. So Justin, I wanted to get your take on the redistricting topic in this year, and give our guests a sense of redistricting and why it's important that we have women and men elected this year to take that gavel next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is about the next 10 years of Texas. And before I get too far, I do just want to acknowledge what's going on right now. I graduated from Houston Independent School District the same year as George Floyd. Some of my middle school friends went to his high school, and we share mutual friends in that capacity. And we all recognize what's going on in this country right now. And the reality of it is, this election in Texas really can help determine the future of what's going on because of redistricting. Right now, we are going to elect who is going to draw the districts for the next 10 years. And the Democratic majority right now will do fair districts. We can have a totally fair playing field where we can compete, and voters can pick their politicians, and politicians won't pick their voters, which is what is happening. And we have this opportunity. Beto won a majority of Texas House seats. I almost won a majority of Texas House seats. And not only that, these districts overlap with hugely competitive congressional seats that are going on in the state of Texas right now. Lizzie Fletcher won in Houston, Colin Allred won in Dallas. There are as many as 6 other congressional districts that will be competitive, including Gina Ortiz-Jones. And these districts on the Texas House are so important because they will help draw the districts for congressional districts, not just in 2022, but all the way through 2030. And if we have fair districts, we have a shot. And I'll just close by saying this. Imagine a Democratic House that is working for fairness for everybody, not just for Democrats, but for every single person, so that we have a democracy that works for everybody, so that we have voting rights. Just today, the appellate court denied vote by mail relief. And so our last opportunity is going to be with the Supreme Court. But imagine if we had a Texas legislature that cared about protecting voting rights. Imagine if we had a Texas legislature that cared about trying to expand access to Medicaid as opposed to trying to shut it down. That's what this election means. Imagine if we had a Texas legislature that actually focused on real issues of pressing concern to everyday Texans as opposed to things like the bathroom bill. And again, not just for 2022, 2024, 2026, 2028, 2030. That's what this election means. That's why I'm so excited to be involved in this organization as the official organization, as the non-member co-chair, because it is so, so important that we can flip the Texas House, and we can do it. We saw a poll just yesterday that had Biden within a point here in Texas of Trump. Texas really can be even the tipping point state in the Electoral College. And the Texas House has this Democratic lean because of how the demographics of Texas have been changing. And frankly, because of Donald Trump, because people are sick of what Donald Trump represents, and people are ready for a change. And that's why this election is so important if they have the resources.
All right, thank you, Justin. Mayor Pete, we can get you back. I want you to meet one of my colleagues. James Tallarico is joining us. James, brief intro for James. You and he have something in common, and that is 2 young white guys. James he just finished his first legislative session, and it was a very historic session because so many Texans voted in 2018. We had major education, not just reform, but we finally stepped up to the plate in the state of Texas, and we put in $11.6 billion in new funding into public education. And as a freshman, James was on that committee, and he represents a part of the state that people thought would never turn blue, and lo and behold, he worked his butt off, stuck to his goals, stuck to his ideals, and flipped the state. So James, I hope you're there because Mayor Pete has some questions for you.
I'm here.
Hey, James.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Good to see you.
James, thanks for joining us. Thanks for everything that you're doing in the chamber too. It's so important. I'd love to hear a little more about what you're seeing on the ground there. And since we do have something in common, I having been the youngest candidate out on the campaign trail, and you as the youngest person serving there, I'd love to know what it's been like for you in those shoes and what you've observed.
Yeah, well, first I just want to say it's such an honor to be here with two of my inspirations, and Representative Israel and Mayor Buttigieg. You know, I was asked to kind of say a little bit about myself and where I'm from, and I think the first thing to know about me, Mayor Pete, is that before I was a politician, I was a middle school teacher, and I often told folks that if you're a middle school teacher, it's the best preparation for serving in the Texas legislature, because if you can handle the drama in a middle school classroom, you can certainly handle what happens on the floor of the Texas House. And you know, the neighborhood I taught in was the west side of San Antonio, which is a beautiful and historic Mexican-American neighborhood, and also one of the poorest zip codes in our whole state. And this week I've been thinking a lot about what I used to tell my students. Every day when I would start class, I would tell my students, you are the light of the world. And I believed in a separation of church and state. And so I didn't tell them what I'm sure you know, Mayor, which is that comes from the book of Matthew, when Christ tells a crowd of the forgotten and the persecuted and the oppressed that you are the light of the world. And he calls us to let our light shine before others. And the message resonates with me, especially this week. And it resonates with me as we feel like we're in kind of such a dark place in our country. It feels like midnight in our state, in our country right now. And that kind of darkness is born out of bigotry and corruption and chaos. But remembering my students and the bravery that they showed every single day in my classroom in San Antonio reminds me that we all have this moral obligation to let our own light shine and to speak out for what is right and what is good and what is just. And I know you've inspired many of us who are younger to do that. And so it's an honor to be here with you. And to answer your last question, you know, I have the privilege of serving as the youngest elected official in state government here in Texas, and that certainly, you know, being able to represent my generation and provide our perspective on issues like climate change and student debt and income inequality is so important. But at the same time, it's incredibly hard to run for office from any underrepresented group, and young people are included in that. You know, I'm a teacher, and so I'm not independently wealthy, and I don't come from family wealth, and I didn't enter politics with a network of wealthy and influential friends. And I was a 28-year-old first-time candidate when I set out to flip a district that President Trump won in 2016, and now I'm a 31-year-old trying to hold on to a district that I won with only 51% of the vote in 2018. And so that's why I'm so blessed to have people like Representative Israel, like Sharon Young, who we heard from earlier, step up and support me and take a chance on young leaders. And I would not be in this position if it wasn't for folks like them.
Well, I'll tell you, Chasten would strongly endorse your assessment of the relevance of teaching middle school, and it's not for the faint-hearted, and must have served you well. I can see why you were able to move people in a district that doesn't just automatically go in there and vote Democrat. And thanks for reminding us of what it is we're supporting when we support your caucus. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Rep. Tellerico. Appreciate your time. I appreciate your work ethic. You worked really hard to get elected, and you did it by being true to yourself. And I know that a lot of people appreciate you for that. So we'll see you later. See you soon. Okay. And, Mayor Pete, next up is a woman from Houston, Texas, who is, in my estimation, going to flip this seat. She is running against a Republican. This is in Houston, an area that includes the hospital district Ann Johnson, I hope you're there to join us. Ann is an attorney with a fierce record when it comes to standing up for human trafficking. So an attorney there. This is her second run. Ann, are you available for a question for Mayor Pete?
I am. I'd be
All
honored.
right. Cool. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hello, Ann. Thanks for stepping up to run. Maybe to begin, can you just tell us a little more about the district and how the path to victory unfolds before you, what it's going to take to win?
So we are excited to run this race in House District 134. When you saw that graph, we were actually the #1 at the top of the list. Beto won this district by 60%. Hillary Clinton won it by 55%. And we know it is a district that is begging for strong Democratic leadership. The priorities that we are going to put forward when we hopefully can join Representative Israel is to fight what we've been talking about, which is taking a Texas House majority so that we can stand up for fair maps. And in this moment of COVID-19 and the civil unrest that we have seen, there is no time that is more important for new leadership up and down the ballot. Our commitment is to making sure that we can fight along with Representative Israel for Medicaid expansion and for common sense gun reforms, 2 issues of the lack of health care and gun violence, which significantly impacts our community of color. We want to start by rebuilding our Texas economy around renewable energy and a great resource that we have in incredible winds and solar. We just need the infrastructure and investment. And there's a really important issue coming up this next session. Representative Israel and the other Democrats have fought very hard for public education. We have to give them backup, because the last time that public education was up in a budget crisis, Republicans had control of every aspect, and they gutted $5.3 billion and 10,000 teacher jobs. Solving a budget crisis on the solution of our children and our teachers is not the way that we can address the future. And so I hope that we can flip this seat and take 8 others to ensure that Democrats can stand up for fight for these values.
Well, I think you're definitely on a winning note by standing up for education for kids and for teachers. I've seen miracles in terms of places defying their partisan habits when it comes to seeing what's at stake for education. But also sounds like by the numbers, this is a district that's so ready for that change. So I'm thrilled that you're providing such a strong candidacy. And would also love to know, as an out LGBTQ candidate, really breaking barriers in the race, what does that mean to you, and how are you finding your experience as an out candidate running and stepping up?
Well, this is not the first time I've run. I actually ran in 2012. And when I ran in 2012, this district was carved as a 51% Republican lean. But midway through our race, even though we were not challenged, Republicans redrew this district to a 57%. And while I was one of 2 open candidates at the time, they plucked out our Montrose precincts, which are our traditional GLBT community. We did not give up and continued to fight in this race, but that reminds us why it is so important that we don't let those same Republican leaders have the pen of redistricting in 2021, because they will again draw us back. My wife, Sonia, and I finally were able to get married, but not after the Texas legislature did anything, but because the U.S. Supreme Court said that you must let these 2 women show their legal and commitment. I think about the Stonewall riots, which are about 50 years ago today, and how many inequalities we still face. And I know that we have to continue to seek justice, and seeking equality means standing up for so many of us and all of us in the areas that we hold true in our democratic values. Mayor Pete, I have to thank you for your run. You shattered the ceiling, and you, along with your other presidential candidates, stood at the most important time in America to make sure that we all could rejoin together and unify in this important cause today. So thank you for being so strong and authentic and leading the way for so many others.
Well, thank you for your candidacy, for your courage, and for the capacity that you're bringing to this race. I can see why you are at the tip of the spear in terms of taking this chamber back, and I can't wait to see good news in November and celebrate with you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Mayor Pete, there's an issue that that I'd like us to touch on briefly, because it's going to come up for Representative Tallarico and myself and my Democratic colleagues, because I speak as a woman from El Paso, Texas, too. That Texas is, unfortunately, the last 10 years we've seen 8 mass shootings. You know, so the fact that our national government has been frozen, our state government, despite all of the tragedy that we've seen close to home, has still seen fit to take every legislative session and use it as an opportunity to not take action on things that have bipartisan support. So that's another distinction that unfortunately goes right across those boundaries. And I see this hairy man on my screen now. It looks like it's Mayor Adler. Hey, Mayor.
Kind of like that.
How are you?
I have so many heroes on this phone call, and well, I tell you, Ann Johnson, that was impressive. I'm excited.
She's going to be a force on the House floor.
Absolutely, I'm real excited to see that, and I apologize for not being with everybody when this thing started.
That's okay.
Mayor Pete, always good to see you. Just again, so many heroes on this call, and Celia, you're doing just a phenomenal job with this campaign to bring back the House to the Democrats. You know, I've just gone through the first part of what's going to be a really difficult conversation the rest of this evening. It's an open meeting with the City Council, and we have hundreds of people that have signed up to speak about race issues and equity issues, speaking about our please's reaction to it this weekend. These are hard and surreal times. We're dealing with the virus and the impact that's having on our community. Most significantly, communities of color who are disproportionately being admitted to hospitals and dying. And then the whole issues of George Floyd and Mike Ramos here, and trust between law enforcement and communities. If you need evidence that who is it that is in leadership in Texas and in the country makes a difference, you don't have to look any further than these two things. The fact that we have so many uninsured in our community because we're not willing to take the money that the federal government makes available so that everyone can get insured, that we're paying for as taxpayers, so that people can be insured all over the country, except in our state. It is that lack of healthcare that is in part making our African American and Latinx population susceptible during this virus. We passed sick leave here, and it was challenged. It got held up in the courts, nearly being preempted by the state, who's been arguing against us. 30% of our population doesn't have the security to be able to stay home if they're sick. And the impact that has on their lives when they're sitting around the kitchen table trying to decide as a family whether their bread earner goes to work, puts themselves at risk, or whether they get a paycheck so the family can eat, is a direct result of the policies coming out of our leadership in Texas. The lack of trust between our police and our community gets exacerbated when our local police turn into immigration agents and start operating a federal agenda. This is hard days. It's a hard day today. It's been a hard 2 or 3 months. But I have never felt the real impact of the difference in leadership as much as I'm feeling it right now. So there is nothing that I won't do as we get into the stretch here to try and change things.
Mayor, Mayor Pete and I were talking about how instead of our national leaders and our state leaders working with you, they just throw up their hands, expect you to take charge until it's time for them to get the good press, and then they want to turn on the valves. We can't afford to let those economic engines like Austin and Dallas and Houston not be connected to one another in this state, and it hurts my heart that we haven't been able to work more cohesively with our local leadership and continue to use you as a piñata to beat up on you every cycle, instead of saying, what can we do to help you? You guys are driving so much economic activity. Everything's upside down. So Mayor Pete and I were talking about that earlier. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Well, it's really true. It's, I envy my colleague mayors around the country, Democratic mayors that are on weekly or daily phone calls with their Republican governors. So even when there's a difference in party, what's going on in our state is disappointing. And beyond that, we did good. You did well in this state because we put in stay-at-home policies across the state. We were begging our governor to step in and do that for us in a statewide way. He said no. It was local control issue. It's one of the first times I've heard him touting local control in a while. But it was because the major cities and the major urban counties stepped forward to do it ourselves that we were able to get 60% of the population covered by these things. That's why we took the steps that enabled Texas to stay healthy. The governor's order came after that, almost after we had provided political cover for that to happen. But the leadership for that, the movement forward in that happened at the city level and the county level. And yes, it would be a lot nicer to have a stronger partnership with state government.
All right. Well, Mayor, we better let you go and do your thing. We're very proud of you. I know you're going through a lot right now, so thank you for your service. I think we have some questions for Mayor Pete, but I appreciate you checking in.
Chairwoman, thank you so much. Mayor Pete, Godspeed. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. Thanks for everything you're doing. It's great seeing you.
Yeah.
Stay well.
Well, Mayor Pete, we're winding up, but let's take some questions from our virtual friends out there. I believe our first question is from Lindsay Billingsley. Lindsay, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Lindsay, fire away.
Sorry, my son said, hi, David. I was just curious. So how much money is it going to take for us to flip the Texas house? And what are y'all looking to raise at the HDCC?
Well, the money question is, it's a big number, but it's a doable number. As you can imagine, a state like Texas is, that's a big old pancake that we got to flip. There's races in Tarrant, Dallas, Bexar County, Harris County, and then we got to protect the gains that we made. So what we've got in mind is the big number is $21 million in Texas, and then the Texas HDCC is going to raise $7 million at the minimum, and that's our part of the $25 million. So our $7 million budget represents the largest organizational investment. And I must say, your kid has a very healthy head of hair.
Can I just editorialize on this really quickly? That number that you cited, 21 million, that's a big number. But we have seen House races, especially special elections, where more than that is raised in a single House race for U.S. Congress. And obviously, I believe the U.S. Congress is extremely important. But I think it's important for the folks on this call, especially knowing how many of you are active and influential in the world of raising funds to support Democratic candidates. Think about that could be the budget of one high-profile U.S. House race. Or it is the game plan, that same amount of money is the game plan to flip the entire legislature of one of the biggest states in the union in a year that's going to hold the balance for how redistricting works and whether we get fair maps, which of course has implications for state and federal office. in terms of bang for your buck, it's extraordinary what you can yield when you invest. And it's great seeing young David there with you.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Mayor Pete, I just saw a question from my friend Sue Marriott. Thanks for joining us, Sue. The question is, how do we give, and how do we have our giving have the most impact? And I'll just recap for everybody. This House Democratic Campaign Committee is a general PAC. You can go onto our website and give monthly. And as to the reason why you would give to us as opposed to others is because we are mission control. We're in contact with all these races. This isn't just a matter of flipping 3 races and staying in touch with 3 and then promoting those 3. We've got to protect the gains that we made and support about a dozen other races. So by giving to us, your funds are going where they're needed. You're not giving money to somebody that doesn't need the money, and it's going to be spread equitably, whether that's digital teams, field support, mailers, digital advertising, and polling. Polling is a big one at the House race level. Spending $30,000 for a poll is a big line item on the budget. HDCC is working to minimize those costs, and in many cases eliminate that line item so that we absorb that cost. So giving us the resources is an efficient way to flip the house, basically. So thank you for the question. And then I thought I saw Deborah Danberg in here somewhere. Andrew, did you want to pipe in, or did you want me to ask Deborah Danberg's question?
Well, I think we may have Diane maybe on the line. I'm going to go ahead and add her in. So thank you, Rep.
Okay.
I'm here.
Hey, Diane, go for it. How are you?
I just wanted to be back in. I didn't have anything right away.
Well, Diane, now you've got to say something deep and insight.
Well, I like the comment that as an ethics issue that they're glad to see the mayor on my computer and not on his. This is Zoom. This was funny.
Diane, while we got your pretty face on the screen, tell us why you think it's important. You've been at Mayor Pete's side and of course at your husband's side. Why do you think it's important that we focus our giving at the legislative level? Oh
my gosh. Steve said it all. You just have to look at the leadership that we've got now and what's happening. And it's really scary, and the long-term impact is scary as well as what's happening in the short term. And I think we have a better shot at the state level and actually turning things around and doing it through grassroots. So yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that we're going to have, of course, it's a presidential year, so we're going to have, and as we know, the presidential dollars have not always stayed here. Texas has a history of being an ATM state where we give other people money and it leaves the state. They do great things with it, but we have an opportunity to keep our resources here. If there's anybody that's interested, also just stay in touch with us, because there's an opportunity for us to just make more friends as the years goes by. As the year goes by, I firmly believe that we've already made national news. Speaker Pelosi has made that clear. We're going to find other friends around the country who are going to ask the same question that Sue just asked and say, where can I best spend my money? And I hope that there's a lot of good people in California, for example, who will say, honey, let's send some money to Texas and we'll be ready to take the pitch. And that's part of what we're doing here today. So I suppose it's time for us to wrap up and make a close. Mayor Pete, any last thoughts while you exit the state of Texas virtually?
Well, first of all, again, just to share how motivated I am to be at your side and how proud I am of the energized support that exists in Texas for getting new and better leadership. I've seen it in your successes in terms of your fantastic leaders. I saw it in terms of the support so many of you put behind my effort and are now joining me in putting behind Vice President Biden, and it's very much at stake in this race. I guess I would close. Look, we are in such a time of pain, and we are reminded of what we are up against every day. Whether it is what we see out of the White House or what we see out of some of the Republican leaders in Texas. So what we are up against ought to be motivation enough. But I still always prefer to think about what we're for and what we could build, what we could deliver. Texas could be leading the nation. Texas could actually be helping the U.S. become more credible in the eyes of the world. When I think about the agenda that you and your colleagues envision to expand access to healthcare and education in a fast-growing, dynamic, diverse, and unique part of the United States of America. So I can't wait to see what Texas will be like, not just the politically tectonic story that it's going to be when you pull this off, but the policies that you're going to deliver that are going to improve everyday life for so many people, and I think be an example to people in states, frankly, like mine. So I'm so honored to be here. I'm thankful for the generosity of the people on this call who I know are being tapped on the shoulder for all kinds of urgent causes at a time like this. And I'm very much looking forward to us having something to celebrate in November.
Yep. Well, thank you. I will leave it there, Mayor Pete. Thank you for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining this phone call. Again, our website is texashdcc.com. You heard from some of our candidates today who are anxious to get out there and get out the vote. We are a young state. We are a diverse state. We know, again, from the numbers from last cycle, there is a path to victory. It's not just us dreaming. The numbers are really there. So stay connected to us. Any questions that we didn't answer or other ideas that you have about your rich cousin in Manhattan, we want to talk to them. We want to get to know them better and tell them the Texas story. So thank you all very much. Track our progress, and we appreciate your time. We know in these times you have a lot of virtual options, and we're glad to spend some time with you. Bye, Mayor. Take care.
Thank you.